Welcome to Module 8 of Climate Change, the Fight of Our Lives, from Emergency to Solutions. The title of this module is Sustainable Development Goals, and it will be brought to you by two teachers from SDGs Academy, Pakistan.
Module 8 is about Sustainable Development Goals. Now, after this module, you should understand what the SDGs are and what they represent as a whole brief introduction of them, and what is the role specifically of Goal 13 in tackling climate change. So, what are they and what do they represent? Now, I couldn't have said it better than the UN does, as they have this as their goals. So, quoting from the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals are the blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. They address those global challenges we face, including those related to poverty, inequity, climate change, environmental degradation, peace, and justice. The 17 goals are all interconnected, and in order to leave no one behind, it is important that we achieve them all by 2030. Now, specifically, the role of Goal 13. Now, these are all the dot points given to you by the United Nations when you look up this specific goal. I'm going to just summarize them briefly so that we can have a better understanding about it. So basically, Goal 13 is talking about taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. So this goal states that many aspects and effects of climate change on people and planet. So the goal aims to limit global warming by 1.5 degrees. That might seem like it might seem like nothing, but to the world and to many ecosystems, including our ocean ecosystem, that is a significant, drastic change. For the Earth to heat up even just 0.1 degree is very adverse in effect. So we want to keep the degree of warming to as low as possible. So it states that greenhouse gases must be falling by 7.6% each year. So with that, if we want to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, we have to be mitigating and we have to adapt to the effects of what we're putting out. But mostly we have to reduce our emissions by stop funding fossil fuels and by being more conscious of the way that we consume. Goal 13 also talks about resilience and adaptation capacity to climate-related hazards and natural disasters. So talking about how we can adapt to natural disasters, such as more strengthened storms and other climatic and weather-related phenomena. So it also talks about integrating climate change measures into national policies and strategies and planning, which is extremely important into taking actual and tangible action. So improving education awareness raising and human and institutional capacity of climate change mitigation, adaptation, and impact reduction is extremely important. So once you are aware and once you are educated, you are able to make better judgment and you are able to understand better and have a more all-rounded perspective of what's going on, and then take action that you understand is going to improve. It also talks about commitment, taking actual commitment and mobilizing countries and operationalizing the Green Climate Fund through capitalization. and promoting mechanisms for raising capacity for effective climate change related planning and management in least developed countries and small island developed states. And this is what we are talking about before, how it's extremely important to plan and manage in these countries that are least developed and who unfortunately who are feeling the most effects of climate change. And it's especially important to focus on women and youth and the local and marginalized communities, because once empowering these people in this community, we have a more equal and more wholesome action plan for taking action on climate change. And these are the sources used. And I just wanted to bring up one more point of climate change and the Sustainable Development Goals and how industries play in this. It's extremely important to understand that no matter what field you're in, no matter where you want to study, where you want to take your career or anything like that, it's extremely important to have these goals in mind and to work in a more sustainable way, and think about the circular economy. And the circular economy is extremely important in this whole equation. And by doing a bit more research on how we can change the ways that we are surviving and the way that we are trading and the way that we are producing different things in our life now, to a more circular way is extremely important. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I hope you are amazing. This is Fawad Longa, and today I'm going to overview about all 17 SDGs goals and particularly focus on goal number 8. So there we go. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so I hope you can see my screen now. So yeah, it's about like overview on SDGs and the focus on SDG 8. There's a little introduction about myself, of course, as a speaker. I'm Ambassador for Vadi Lanka, and I'm a life coach, SDG educator and activist, modernization trainer, consultant, and so on. That's what my entire career. Okay, so first of all, let's have a look into the historical aspect. Like, if we just go back, let's about more than 50 years back, almost like about that. So what we're gonna find out, we're gonna find like the origins of the SDGs. How did they arise? Why did United Nations member states decide that this is the right time that we need the SDGs actually? So these are the major aspects that we will be look into actually. So if you just go back and then if you just see like the core of the sustainable development goals actually is to help the world to move irresistibly towards the sustainable development. And that means like a planet of shared prosperity, of social inclusion, and of environmental. And as I said before, almost about 50 years back, more or less, there was a great conference held in 1972 called Human Environment. And the concept was only one Earth concept. The core idea is to set clear goals to help orient the behavior of governments, businesses, each of us like as a citizens, as a students of researchers, as activists, as consumer, that we are pointed in and in shared direction. One of the very great quotation by the former uh, you could say the former president of United States of America. President John F. Kennedy, he stated that time actually, like he said, like by defining our goal more clearly, by making it seem more manageable and less remote, we help all people to see it, to draw hope from it, and to move irresistibly, irresistibly, towards it. That was a great quotation during that time, actually, by the former president of USA. After that, what was happened? I mean, it was like the first conference, first ever actually conference that entire United Nations member state has actually recognized that the economy on one side and the environment is actually on the other side. Were all like they were like a kind of a collision course because of increasing weight of human activity on nature, and which is actually leading to environmental risk of magnitude and scale that were unprecedented, I would say. After 15 years of that particular conference, there was a very important commission has been formed under the leadership of Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland and the Prime Minister of Norway. And the Brundtland Commission established the core idea, actually, the idea of sustainable development itself. And even that idea actually really tremendously boosted up the breakthrough. The Brundtland Commission actually defined the sustainable development that meets the need of a current generation without compromising the ability of a future generation. That that was actually the thing. And then after they have clearly mentioned like the current generation have the responsibility to the future to manage all life and manage the economy in such a way that we do not hinder future generation in meeting their needs. And that concept of sustainable development was actually embraced 5 years later on the 20th anniversary of the Stockholm Conference, which has that became actually known as Rio Earth Summit 1992. The technical name about that time was actually the United Nations Conference on Earth, United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. The Rio Summit 1992 actually adopted the concept of sustainable development and then gave the global shared concept by adopting three multilateral environmental agreements. The first one was United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The second one was Convention on Biological Diversity for Biological Conservation. And the third and the last one was United Nations Convention to combat desertification to stop the spread of desert in the dry land region of the world. So these three wonderful treaty actually has came together, but after 20 years in 2012 actually, again the Rio summit like after 20 years actually, the United Nations members have actually meet again, and the same conference has been known as the Rio Plus 20 conference because it was after 20 years of that. And then on the Rio Plus 20, the summit actually, the governments and the member states has actually said like what we can do, how we can put this sustainable development in front of the world. so that the people everywhere understand the urgency and the importance of those SDGs. We had the you can say the concept earlier, a context actually from the goals, which was actually about the fighting poverty that have been adopted in 2000 actually. That was actually, and which we all know known as the MDGs. The 15-year period from 2000 to 2015 have been known as Millennium Development Goals or MDGs. Excuse me. So the idea caught on that the MDGs era from 2000 to 2015 would be followed by a sustainable development goal, or you can say the SDGs era, for the period from 2015 to 2030, actually. And indeed, the member states of the General Assembly actually caught the idea, and they have started negotiation. They have started negotiation on the thing like how would those I mean SDGs would look like, and how would they going to act, and what will be the framework of to that side actually. That was the major thing. And then the formation of SDGs has came across. Like they they took the survey of government, and initially they proposed 300 goals, which would like not to do, but so over 3 years they have negotiated. They negotiated like different governments, member states. They negotiated 3 years. Like we only see 17 years, but earlier there were 300 proposed goals actually. But then they have give the priorities in the sense like a 17 high priorities: prosperity, people and planet, or you can say like for economic, social and then environmental objectives actually. And those 17 goals were embedded in overall commitment and form up the framework of a corporation known as the Agenda 2030, and they become therefore the framework of a corporation period till 2030. And that's what we can see, the Agenda 2030. And that's what we have in 17 SDGs acclamation actually in September 25th 2015 actually. And that's you can see at the front of you now, all amazing 17 goals. So that was the actually the formation. However, the major problem, or you can say the core aspects that 193 countries have actually indulged, they discuss like what was the actually problem. The problem is like we have a massive environmental threats such as like global warming, loss of biodiversity, and then we have widening inequalities between the rich and the poor, and the member states, of course, of the United Nations, of course. And that's at the end of the day, they come up with, I mean, all 193 countries has actually adopted sustainable development goals precisely. I mean, I must say, like, it's in a really remarkable, it's a really remarkable range of aspiration. I would say that happened actually in 2015. I would say that it was like a great initiative. Like you have just like listened into like 3 years of negotiation, proposed 300 goals, and they come up with a great aspiration actually. I would say uh, the innovation, all these 17 goals, which actually highlight all these basic necessities of human being or the entire mankind, and of course to the planet as well, which I will be going to explain right now into that side actually. So let's move. And then, yes, you have seen those 17 goals actually at the front, and that's all amazing. However, those you can say 17 goals have been formed in a way that that covers the 5 P's, and that's what we call them as actually the SDGs holistic approach. 5 elements under the Agenda 2030, and those 5 P's like people, planet, prosperity, peace and justice, and partnership. Like people, when we talk about, of course, is the end of poverty and hunger, and in all forms of ensure dignity and equality. Or if you talk about the prosperity, ensure prosperous and fulfilling lives in harmony with nature. Then we have a planet that protect our planet's natural resources and climate for future generation. Then we have a peace, like foster peaceful, just and inclusive societies. And the finally is actually that combine all 17 goals is actually the partnership, implement the agenda through a solid global partnership actually. That's what actually. However, if you just like bifurcate, if you just like have a look into those 5 P's. So those 5 P's are actually differentiating different goals, like from 1 to 7. We can see the people goal. We have a number one, poverty, of course, that is like to end extreme poverty by the year 2030. Then we have the number two, that is goal number two, zero hunger actually. That is like about ending extreme hunger. Then we have SDG 3, ensuring universal access to health services. Number 4 actually is about the quality education, ensuring universal access for all children to, if we talk about like to equality education from pre-kindergarten all the way through secondary school completion. And then if we talk about the technical training actually, so that's what we have. And then number 5 actually is about the gender equality. Then number 6 is a clean water and sanitization things, of course. And number 7 is actually affordable and a clean energy. So these 7 goals are actually known as the people goal. However, if you see more from 8 to 12, they are known as the prosperity goals. Well, starting from number 8, that is good jobs and economic growth, which I will be, of course, explaining more in detail later on in this presentation about the goal number 8. Number 9 is, of course, the industry innovation and infrastructure. If we talk about like industrial revolution or yeah 4.0. Number 10 is reduce inequalities. Between the member states actually. Number 11, sustainable cities and communities. Number 12 is actually the consumption and production, like responsible of consumption and production, like to put it, if you talk about like decarbonization, if you talk about like fossil fuel, or if you talk about more into carbon footprints, actually. So they have actually amazingly divided into that. Then we have 3 planet goals actually that focus into to the planet actually. That is goal number 13, that the climate action, that like to stop the grave dangers from a human induced climate change. Number 14, like life below water, and that to protect the ocean and the marine ecosystem. Number 5, life on land actually, like to protect the terrestrial ecosystem, if we talk about it. So these 3 are being bifurcated into the planet goal. And number 16 is about the peace and justice actually, like this is about the institutional, the institutional justice, and then and if you talk about the peace, like between the countries, between the nations, of course, and then the diplomatic relations, of course, like without having the peace, without having the proper justice among the institutions, of course, you will not be able to achieve the proper uh, like the progress and then a proper empowerment. I would say that that's the thing. And the last one is actually the last P. The fifth P is known as the partnership goal. That's the 17, which is the key, I would say. Like I personally like it a lot, like for global partnership to achieve all the other sustainable development goals. Like, so this is actually the if you just have a look into how did they bifurcate it, like I've just explained to you. So those were like really amazing, like they highlighted into the major areas, like from 1 to 7, the major goals are regarding the human being, of course. And then they jump into the prosperity, like the progress, like if you talk about the GDPs, of course, we talk about the Industrial Revolution, and then they talk about, of course, they forget it into peace and justice, and then about the climate. And the last one, of course, is the partnership, like that gather all of them, like without partnership, without collaboration, without the globalization, you will not be able to achieve all those 17 goals. That's the beauty, I would say, of these amazing 17 goals. I mean, that's is really amazing, I would say, into that. Okay, so let's move further about, if we just focus into the SDG 8, which is about the decent work and economic growth. Like, this is actually the key for progressing the you can say the nations. And that's itself clearly says about like promote sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for everyone, of course, for like it's a right for the progress and to move ahead. So if I just like move into a more statistic way side, like almost about roughly half of the world population like still lives on the equivalent about $2 a day. And then in too many places, if we just have a look, like having a job doesn't guarantee the ability to escape from poverty, which is one of the key issue. And then like often related to poverty, if you talk about like inequality, and then if you talk about like discrimination, like in many contexts there are certain groups that, like if you talk about like such as the workers with disabilities, women workers, youth, or if you talk about like the migrant, among others, or if you talk about like facing particular obstacles in accessing decent work, and maybe especially vulnerable to abuses, I would say that. So if from the facts and figures side, like if you analyze the situation, so it says almost about uh, since 2008, I would say, like having an average only 0.1% annually, compared with 0.9% between 2000 to 2007. Actually, that is what is the fact side. And even a 45% of wage, and then salaried workers are employed on a full time, like permanent basis. And then even that share is like a declining fact. And then by 2019, more than 212 million people will be like out of work, up from the current 201 million, of course. And then if you talk about like a businesses side, like businesses are like engines for job creation, of course, and then economic growth, such as entrepreneurship. And then after this COVID-19, we have a digital entrepreneurship. So more business opportunities could create a more jobs, of course, and more economic growth. And that's actually like a decent work opportunities, and are like a good for businesses and in society, and in different companies that uphold labor standards across their own operations, and then value chains that face like lower risk of reputational damage and then legal liability, I would say that. And that's what we call like instituting non-discriminatory practices, and embracing diversity and inclusion. I mean, that could actually lead to greater access to skilled, productive talent. So the business is actually the key. Like the entrepreneur, if you just like have a look into the current era, entrepreneurship is actually everywhere. They even though a government are actually uh, encouraging the entrepreneurship, and then in fact now we are into the digital era, digital world. So it's about like a digital entrepreneurship, and that's of course the inclusion that could lead to the greater access to skilled and productive talent. So let's discuss more about into the key businesses, like what this SDG 8, Sustainable Development Goal number 8, is actually specifically focused into. What are the key area that actually highlighting? Employment. This is the key, I would say. Like uh, of course, I mean, if there is no employment opportunity, the rate of poverty will definitely going to be rise. People are going to be under the uh, poverty range, of course, because there is no vacancy, there is no employment opportunities, of course. Then we talk about economic inclusion. SDG 8, which I will be describing the targets, of course. Then you will get to know like all those targets of the that SDG 8 is actually into the decent work and economic growth for any of the country. Then we have non-discrimination, like all are equal, doesn't matter which sect, doesn't matter which particular religion or sect or color or category or ethnicity, doesn't matter. It's a non-discrimination, non-discrimination. That's what the basic business theme of SDG 8. Then we have a capacity building, like if you talk about the CSR activity, corporate social responsibility, that creates a great opportunities that actually enhancing the employees of a different companies. I would say that is what we call the capacity building. And then availability of a skilled workforce, that is very very important, and that's what the targets of SDG 8 is actually pointing out. And then you have a elimination of a forced or compulsory labor. Actually, that is actually the key aspects what the SDG 8 itself highlighting you into that. So let's move into, if we talk about the targets of all SDG 8 particularly, of course. So 8.1 is actually focusing into the sustainable economic growth, which is like says about the sustained per capita economic growth in accordance with national circumstances, and then particularly like at least 7% growth, um, like GDP, of course, gross domestic product growth per annum in the least uh, developed countries like your LDCs countries, of course. And then we have target 8.2, that is diversity, innovate, and upgrade for economic productivity. That actually focus into the achieve higher level of economic productivity through diversification, technological upgrading and innovation. That's including like focusing on to high level, high value added and labor intensive sectors. If we talk about 8.3, that says about promote policies to support job creation and growing enterprises. Like it's actually focusing and promoting the development oriented policies that support like productive activities such as decent job creation, entrepreneurship, creativity, and innovation, and encourage the formalization actually and the growth of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. And then that's of course also giving the access to the financial services. That's goal number, I mean the target, goal number 8, target 8.3 is actually focusing into. 8.4 is actually about the improve resource efficiency in consumption and production. Like it's about like improving the progress through 2030, like global resource efficiency in consumption. And if you talk about like the production, and in accordance with the 10 years framework of program and sustainable consumption and production. Number 8.5 target, that focus into full employment and decent work with equal pay. Actually, that is very key issue right now the entire world is actually facing. So actually by adopting 8.8, goal number 8 is actually helping you towards the decent work and an economic growth. So 8.5 is actually saying like achieve a full and productive employment, and then if you talk about like decent work for all men and women without any discrimination, that's include actually also the young people and then persons with disability and equal pay for work and equal value, I would say. 8.6, youth. Yes, that is the key thing. Promote youth employment, education, and training. That I mean, I personally like this 8.6 target. It's very good. Like, I mean, it's almost like 1.6 billion actually right now, the population for the youth from across the globe actually. And that's clearly says about the reduce of proportion of youth not in employment, education, or training. Number 7, and modern slavery, trafficking, and child labor. This is the core issue, like that to take immediate and effective measures actually to eradicate this forced labor and modern slavery, human trafficking actually, and secure like a prohibition and elimination of the worst form of a child labor actually. That's the case. 8.8 is about the protect labor rights and promote safe working environment. Actually, I mean it says about like the secure, giving the safe and securing working environment for all the workers. Like that's include of course without any discrimination. That's include like migrant workers. So if you talk about like a women migrant and all those precarious employment actually. 8.9, promote beneficial and sustainable tourism. Like this is very important, especially for the countries who are actually the tourism uh, is actually the key for their economic development and their generation of revenue, I would say that. So it's about like implement different kind of policies to promote sustainable tourism, and that actually creates the different jobs and promotes local culture and products. 8.10 universal access to banking, insurance, and finance services. I would say that. And then we have 8.8a. I mean, they have categorized 8.10. They have a categorized into like increase aid for trade support. Like instead of different kind of hind rates, different kind of conditions, there should be a proper aid in trade facility for developing countries, like in particular like LDCs countries. That's like true enhanced integrated framework for trade related technical assistance to LDCs countries. And then we have developed a global youth employment strategies. Like as mentioned, youth, they are the future. And as I stated earlier, like the future generation, they have clearly emphasized into like, I mean, from my past experience, like whenever you read about the SDGs and especially about the Agenda 2030, there's a very term that comes very often is about the future generation, and that's why they keep emphasizing into the youth employment strategies into that. So these are the amazing targets for Goal 8, and we just move into the solution side now, like to have a look into the solution from the business perspective. Like if they offers some different apprenticeship opportunities, like different MTOs, like managing training officers, like different uh, companies they usually does. They recruit MTOs. They invest on them, and they make them according their needs and requirements, and that's what we call the apprenticeship opportunities, and that's good for the great solution. Then we have like foster entrepreneurship culture and invest in or mentor young entrepreneurs. Yes, this is the key, like to keep encouraging the young entrepreneurs, whatever they come up with their ideas, they have the great innovation, they are the future leaders, of course. So this is something the key solution from that side. And then we have like initiating skill development programs, like that could somehow polish and enhancing their skills, that really helping into the supply chain side. And then we talk about like put in a place mechanisms to identify child labor and forced labor throughout the global supply chain, and implement remediation when abuses are discovered, unfortunately, in such companies and in such organizations. And then company needs to think about like to install a firm policy against unfair hiring. That is, I mean, there are companies that have some discrimination policies. Like, honestly speaking, like I've been through with many times with this unfair hiring and recruitment practices, and that especially into particularly into the vulnerable group, such as like migrant workers. I would say that. That's it. So that's all from our side. These are the references that I've quoted for today's session. It's about. I hope you have understand, and I hope you like this whole session. And if you have any question, you're more than welcome to send me those questions via the Consent Authority. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and may God bless you. May God bless the entire world. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
We have now reached the end of Module 8. I hope you have enjoyed it. I also hope that you are still in the mood for learning even more. When it comes to homework, you can take a break this week because there will be none, but I'll see you in the next module. Bye for now.